My name is Edward, and the house felt like the definitive step into my future. I was a young IT professional, finally making enough to afford a decent, slightly dated two-story house in a quiet neighborhood for my wife, Sarah. She was 8 months pregnant, and the sunny, comfortable first-floor flat was meant to be our sanctuary before the chaos of new parenthood began. Below us lived Suraj, an Indian restaurant owner, his gentle wife Selvi, and their bright, always smiling daughter Geeta. Initially, the atmosphere was perfect, warm, communal, and exactly what we needed. Suraj was the picture of old-world generosity, often bringing up containers of incredible aromatic curries from his downtown restaurant, apologizing for the kitchen smells that occasionally wafted up. We shared coffees, swapped stories about the neighborhood, and were quickly building a small, comfortable community based on mutual respect and quiet distance. The entire property had one critical, undeclared flaw: the parking situation. There was a small paved drive at the side of the house, just big enough for 2 small cars. For years, Suraj had used this space not as parking, but as his own personal overflow storage and impromptu loading zone. Since he relied on a delivery van and had no personal car, the space was perpetually stacked with empty crates, old cooking oil drums, and restaurant supplies. It wasn't a formal parking spot. It was just his space, established through years of unchallenged use. That silent understanding was about to shatter. The inflection point came the day I brought home the new car. It wasn't just a car. It was a dark blue, gleaming saloon, a tangible, expensive symbol of my hard-won success in the competitive London IT sector. It was the first major purchase Sarah and I had ever made, bought with months of overtime and careful saving. I pulled into the drive, carefully maneuvering past Suraj's usual chaotic pile of crates, and parked it neatly in the only clear area, right next to the fence. Suraj appeared almost instantly from his ground-floor doorway, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel, his usual easy smile instantly replaced by a hard, calculating look of shock and resentment. He didn't welcome the car. He saw it as a brazen physical invasion. He had used that space, unchallenged, as an extension of his business for years. And my car, my very visible symbol of quiet, professional arrival, represented a direct, immediate threat to his established, unchallenged territory. He felt disrespected, overlooked, and instantly threatened by what he perceived as my cold, corporate financial growth asserting dominance over his older, less defined claim. His first passive-aggressive move was simply leaving a leaking container of used cooking oil perilously close to my front tire. The parking space became the immediate, unbearable bone of contention. The subtle war began with escalation. Suraj started leaving his loading crates just inches from my car bumper and passenger door, forcing Sarah, pregnant as she was, to contort herself into impossible, painful angles to get out. My frustration built into rage. My response was clinical. I bought bright white traffic paint and a roller, and one Sunday morning I drew a neat, official-looking white line on the pavement clearly, aggressively marking the space as exclusively mine. The passive-aggressive skirmish was now a formalized declaration of war. The feud metastasized into genuine, corrosive hostility. One morning I walked outside and felt my breath catch. A massive, deliberate, deep scratch ran the entire length of my driver's side door. The keying was crude, violent, and intentional. I didn't have video or witnesses, but I knew instantly it was Suraj. The fury in his eyes the day before, when I had firmly asked him to move a rotting crate, was all the evidence I needed. The damage was well over £1,000, and the cost wasn't just financial. It was personal. My sense of violation was absolute. My retaliation was cold, precise, and devastatingly strategic, leveraging my professional skills for maximum destruction. I spent 2 sleepless nights digging through public and semi-public digital records, isolating the bulk supplier list for Suraj's restaurant, the cheap, non-local suppliers he relied on to keep his margins thin. I used my IT access to create an anonymous tip to the city health inspectors, fabricating a detailed, highly convincing report that alleged he was using expired, bulk-purchased ingredients imported from a questionable, unsanitary source in another country. My revenge was cruel, perfectly targeted to cost him his entire livelihood, not just his property. The result was immediate and catastrophic. Suraj's beloved struggling restaurant was instantly suspended pending a full, lengthy investigation, essentially destroying his business license and income overnight. He knew I was behind it. The timing was too perfect. In a blind, animalistic rage fueled by the collapse of his life's work, he marched to the house and, in front of Sarah and me, picked up a loose brick from the garden and smashed the driver's side window of my car. Shards of glass exploded everywhere. It was the final, irreversible act of aggression. The police were called, but the damage was done. The personal and financial war was now total, toxic and utterly irreversible. The feud intensified to a horrifying degree, pushing both of us into psychological isolation. We refused to back down, locked in a cycle of destructive, unyielding ego. Suraj's wife, Selvi, and Geeta stopped making eye contact. The house became a prison of tension, the silence more suffocating than the arguments. Sarah's anxiety skyrocketed, threatening her health. And I watched my ambition turn into pure, destructive bitterness, obsessed only with Suraj's complete ruin. Then, in the dead of the night, amid the crushing tension and hatred, a moment of pure, shocking humanity interrupted our war. Sarah screamed not in pain but in terror. Her water had broken and the labor had begun prematurely, far earlier than expected. I fumbled for my keys, adrenaline blinding me, mentally cycling through the insurance paperwork for the car I now couldn't rely on, unable to think clearly. Before I could complete a coherent thought, Suraj burst through his downstairs door, instantly assessing the situation. He saw Sarah, pale and panicked, and the rigid walls of his animosity instantly shattered, replaced by raw, panicked concern for her life. Without a word, he rushed to her side, helped her carefully into his own delivery car, the one he usually used for inventory, and drove us like a reckless maniac through the empty streets to the emergency room. He stayed until the doctor confirmed Sarah and the baby were stable, a pillar of unexpected strength and silent care amid the complete chaos we had created. Sitting in the sterile, fluorescent hospital waiting room, the full, nauseating weight of my own malice crashed down on me. I realized my devastating mistake. I had framed a fundamentally decent, kind man for a crime that cost him his livelihood, his identity, all over a few feet of pavement. Suraj had just saved my wife and potentially my child. The sight of his raw, human kindness and competence, starkly juxtaposed against the backdrop of my professional, cruel betrayal, shattered my conscience. I tried desperately to make amends the next day. I found Suraj, his face lined with exhaustion, and offered him a cashier's check for a massive amount, tearfully admitting the truth about fabricating the health inspection report. But Suraj's ego was hurt far deeper than his wallet. He accepted neither the money nor the apology. His eyes, though lacking the earlier blind fury, held a deep, cold, unforgiving wound. He simply nodded once, his face emotionless, turned, and I knew with chilling certainty that he wasn't done. He was plotting his final, destructive revenge. The horrifying twist came 3 agonizing weeks later. I was consumed by guilt, paranoia, and fear, waiting for the final shoe to drop. In a moment of sheer panic and preemptive desperation, I concocted a final plan to end it. Something drastic, maybe planting evidence in his flat that would guarantee his arrest, forcing him out permanently. But as I stood outside his door late that night, my heart pounding, the vivid image of him rushing Sarah to the hospital, the image of his raw, human decency overriding years of hatred, slammed into my conscience. I couldn't do it. His one act of pure goodness had saved me from becoming a monster. I lowered my hand, retreated, and quietly wept, realizing that the evil I had initiated had been defeated by an unsolicited, profound kindness. The story ends not with violence or police sirens, but with silence and emptiness. 2 months later, both families moved out simultaneously, broken and financially exhausted by the feud. We both surrendered the lease. The house owner, a retired, weary gentleman, refused to rent the ground floor for months, finally installing a tiny handwritten sign by the vacant drive. It didn't mention Suraj or me. It simply chillingly warned future tenants, "Do not own a car." The parking space remains empty, a permanent, visible monument to the fact that ego, pride, and the destructive need to win a petty conflict are far more corrosive than any physical damage or financial ruin, capable of permanently destroying 2 families over a few feet of pavement.